When you start to look at law, actually, law doesn't always say much about dawah. Dawah is more just taken by example of Rasulullah and his companions. And because also it may be done differently. There are different methods of dawah, and there are different situations in which those methods change. But there is one thing that I came across in one of Imam Nawawi's books, rahimahullah, and this shows us the severity of neglecting dawah and neglecting receiving someone into Islam, because he states in this that if a person comes to you and they're asking, please teach me about Islam and receive me into Islam, if you so much as tell him to wait until you finish your conversation, you have committed kufr. I want to say that again. Okay? This is from Imam Nawawi, one of the greatest imams of our ummah. This is known. He stated that if anyone comes to a Muslim asking to be brought into Islam, if you delay him long enough just to finish the conversation you're having, you have committed kufr. You have committed disbelief. And that is very, very, very severe. Very severe. You have denied that person the most fundamental right that he has, to be taken into Allah's deen as soon as possible. It's very, very serious. And so now we come back to then the issue, okay, so now why is this a question? Where is this coming out of? There are no convert rights. Needs are also rights in Islam, but we don't hear so much about that, okay? But basically, the rights of converts as the rights of Muslims are not being recognized and not being practiced. Okay, Muslim converts actually are being many times violated, or at the very least, ignored, abandoned, and forgotten a lot of times. Okay, when it comes to then seeing that there is a new situation, okay, then you're allowed Islamically to raise now a new question. Okay, if there was nothing before called convert rights, because all the Muslims were good and doing what they were supposed to do, okay, and the system of Islam existed, and so there was no issue. The problem wasn't there. But now we have a different situation. Muslims are away from deen, and we do not have the Islamic situation. We do not have the system of Islam is not what we're living under. Okay? So now it becomes an issue in which ijtihad should be made, because now it's a new question, because you've changed the framework of how the question is put forth. Anytime there were situations and issues that had not been previously answered, either from the Quran or from the Sunnah, and it needed someone to really examine, to say, okay, what is the answer to this question now? Or if the situation had changed, then you would have the mujtahid imam, you would have the qadi, the judge, who would sit down then, and they have a set of rules that they go by to look at the situation and try to assess, okay, if we apply this ruling, what is the evidence for it? But if we apply it and it has a negative consequence, then we may not need to apply that ruling, and that is established in Islam. That was established in the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That at times and situations, you do not apply an obvious ruling even if it's from the Quran. But when new situations arise and there are new problems that have to be answered, then there are rules for establishing the evidence. if we ask the question, do we have obligations to future generations? Okay, this is a question that it really, in Islam's history, it doesn't have, okay, it's kind of a new question. It really has not been laid out. Sheikh Musa Ferber, and he had published a book. What he does, and he doesn't give the fatwa, but he lays out the framework for the fatwa. What would be the evidences for it? And that's kind of the approach that we can also take in trying to understand what is the level of obligation in establishing the right programs for converts here. It is obvious that Islam is not to hurt people. It is not to cause pain. It is not to cause delays in human being, the development of human lives. It is not to cause destruction. And so if these things are going on, it's because we are not applying Islam to the situation. And that should be just fundamentally obvious, and that's what then we have to do. Is we have to look at the situation and say, okay, what would Islam actually do for this situation? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made His deen to facilitate growth and strength and rectification and guidance and security and happiness and well-being. And so anytime we see that that's not happening, we have a problem that has to be addressed within the community. And now coming back then, so historically, what was the purpose of the hijrah?
Asylum or a safe haven for Muslims to be Muslims.
Bingo. Okay? The difficulties in Mecca had I mean, we're just getting worse and worse and worse. Okay? And those early converts were dying. Their children were dying sitting in their laps because there was a period in which the Quraysh had prohibited any kind of trade or exchange of any kind with the Muslims. And they were locked up in ostracism and boycotted, and they were literally starving to death. This is the time period in which we have the narration from Bilal, radiallahu anhu, saying that I used to sneak food in for Rasulullah stuck under my arm, so the Quraysh would not see it. And that was food that was being brought to Allah's most beloved messenger. And there were two immigrations before the immigration to Medina. And both of them were to Habasha, Ethiopia. And there were two different groups, and they did find asylum there. But our brother is correct. They were running for their lives and seeking safety and security and well-being for the people who were coming into Islam. And it's in that time period that we have narrations that at times Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would advise people coming into Islam, I don't want you to stay here with us. We're in a very difficult circumstance. I want you to go back to your tribe where you will be safe. And when you hear that Allah has given me victory, then come back to us. Okay? But that hijrah, it was for that purpose. And the first two things that the two main things that they established there in the beginning was the Charter of Medina, which established Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the leader of Medina, Muslims, Christians, Jews, pagans, all of them, their leader and their judge. And the agreement for them all to be allies to one another in the event of assault. In the event they were attacked, then they were all to stand together. It was an agreement of mutual aid. Okay? And that was under the Charter of Medina. The second thing that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam established was the ikhwa or ukhwa, okay? It was a brotherhood that he made between Muhajirin and Ansar, and each one of those men and women who came, the men who came from Mecca into Medina, those are the Muhajirin, the ones who were immigrating, and he would appoint them a brother from the Ansar, from the people of Medina, and he bound them legally. It wasn't just, oh, you guys be brothers, just some vague concept. No, he tied them together by law. And they were allowed, they were actually given the law of inheritance from one another. And that's how they were connected. Just the way siblings would be. Exactly the way. And so that was the concept. And they helped each other in marriage. They helped each other in business. It was the purpose to help them get their lives established and get on their feet. We have the same principles can be applied today and should be. And so this is a major source of evidence of what convert programs should be. It's not one program, okay? It's a whole scope of issues of how do converts get established in their deen, in their lives, in their intellectual and emotional well-being, their children, and their material well-being. All of the major objectives of Islamic law. And so we have that source to learn from and to understand. What did our Prophet do in Medina? And we can do the same thing. But if we're blocked from doing the same thing because we just don't have the quality of Muslims today, or Muslims don't have the time for it, then we can then say we have to institutionalize this within the community.